Welcome back, friends. This is Fantasy Pros, the fantasy football podcast. I am Chris Welsh. That is Pat Fitzmaurice. And today we've got quarterbacks and we've got tight end ranks for week 12. We'll be breaking down what the top 12 on Fantasy Pros ECR looks like for both of those positions and digging a little bit on some of our favorite plays, especially quarterbacks, some outside the top 12 plays. Thank you guys as always for hanging out. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel if you're listening on the pod or if you're on the YouTube. Go to the podcast and make sure you check out all of our great tools over on Fantasy Pros. Get my playbook, sync your league, get that advice. It's just about at the playoff crunch. It's still a really important crunch here with Bipocalypse happening this week, and you can get personalized information right for your team when you sync your league, optimize lineups, top pickups, and I know trade deadlines are done, but we had the trade analyzer that was out there saying which trades you could do, but you still got waiver assistant through the rest of the way through. So go and check out my playbook. It's not too late to sync your leagues. Plus on Fantasy Pros, on those, we've got amazing tools out there. Are they going to play? Will they sit? You've got everything under the sun, so go and check it out today. Mr. Pat Fitzmaurice, are you ready to talk about some quarterbacks and some tight ends?
I am, Welsh. Let me ask, do you always go with Bipocalypse or do you ever go with Bimageddon?
Ooh, I'm a Bipocalypse guy. I think I've referenced that on our rank shows this week a couple times. But we'd have to do Bimageddon, right? It works.
I'll mix in a Bimageddon now and again, but I'm mostly Bipocalypse.
Okay, I was about to say, are you a Bigeddon type of guy? I'm Bipocalypse just flows. It feels really nice.
It does.
Yeah, it does. I wish we would not have them. No one wants an apocalypse or Bipocalypse.
It's nicer to say the word than it is to actually experience it. And I have to deal with this, especially when it's crunch time in all our leagues, and not having players from 6 teams available to us is always a little maddening this late in the year.
It's not like a little. I think it's super maddening to have 6 in week 12. When didn't we have like a week in the middle where there was none, and then we had 1 week where there was 2? We should have a concerted effort. The NFL, there should be this concerted effort to get this done before the teams. Or week 12 should be the final week. You're going to lose Derrick Henry if you have him in week 14, which is crazy. I know they're not catering to fantasy football or anything like that, but I would think it would be pretty easy that you get this thing done by somewhere between week 10 and 12. And also it's kind of an advantage for teams, not fantasy, but the Ravens to have a bye week in week 14. And then what do you have? 3 more regular season weeks. I mean, I just don't see the point of that week 10, week 11, week 12 maximum. These buys should be done.
Yeah, it's not like the 1990s where the NFL tried to ignore fantasy football. Like, they realize it is a driver of interest in their product, and for them to sort of not accommodate fantasy, and like, does it really help the teams to have buys this late in the season? Don't you want most of the teams on their buys in the middle of the season? It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, obviously for us, for practical purposes, having bye weeks when, as you mentioned, Welsh, FFPC, like this is the last week of the regular season. The Scott Fish Bowl playoffs start this week.
I mean,
it's going to be if people can.
It's a bloodbath. That's a bloodbath. The playoffs to start on Bipocalypse with 6 out. It's nothing we can do about it. And more important to stay attuned to waivers and the streams, and also to our live streams, by the way. So we can help you guys out there. The tools, my playbook, but put a pen in a reminder of really paying attention to the bye weeks and the scheduling when you're putting your rosters together. Sometimes you can't let it you don't want to let it take you off of Derrick Henry because he's going to be in week 14. You don't want to be like, well, now I don't want to draft him when he has been how he is. But it is something to pay attention to. I have one of I think it's my FFPC team that both of them look like they're locked to a playoff run. Week 14, which is the championship round of FFPC, I swear to God, 6 of my guys are on bye. And it just happened to be that way that I've got this massive bye week happening in the championship. And it's just, we're lamenting here. It's a brutal blow dealing with these playoffs, but it does create a lot of big questions, and it pushes that to the quarterbacks and the tight ends. So let's talk about the quarterbacks. Here's your big board for the top 12 this week. When we take a look, we've got Jalen Hurts as the number 1, Lamar Jackson at 2. So at least we've got the core here at 1, 2. Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray. You're not hearing Josh Allen because part of Bipocalypse. Coming in at 6, Jared Goff, Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, and Tua comes in at 12 going up against New England. Two quarterbacks have a 5-star rating this week. That is Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, according to FantasyPros matchup ratings. And there's a couple 4s in there as well that's at the tippy top. Let me ask you just really quickly, we don't put like a hyper focus on the no-brainer quarterbacks. Justin Herbert comes in at 4 this week on ECR. And I know he's played phenomenal. And I know it's a great matchup against the Baltimore secondary. But does it feel at all a little Russy last week where Russ was like 6 or 7? And it's like we're starting Russ over like absolute. I mean, not all but people are starting Russ over some big quarterbacks. I think Russ was going in. Someone benched Patrick Mahomes in the Discord show for Russell Wilson. Do you at all think maybe Herbert at 4 feels like that if people are really going to bench, Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy or anything like that? Or is this the play because of the Baltimore secondary?
I think this is right, Welsh, because the Pittsburgh offense is the leopard that's not going to change its spots. They're going to run the ball even if it's against this pass funnel Ravens defense. The Steelers still ran the ball very aggressively. That's just who the Steelers are on offense, and they're not going to get away from that. I think we've seen more of a sea change with this Chargers offense. Like it's been a little more flexible. Like early in the season, they were very run focused, and we saw Justin Herbert average 150 passing yards or something over their first 4 games. They've really loosened the reins on Herbert, and he's running the ball more aggressively lately too. So all of a sudden, it's just been this bonanza, and we're seeing the Chargers let Herbert be Herbert, and he is reminding us of what an incredibly talented guy he is with the way he can spin the football and put it in tight windows and use that mobility and speed. I know way back when, Welsh, in Justin Herbert's final college football game of his career, he ran all over my Wisconsin Badgers in the Rose Bowl. Like he didn't beat us with his arm, he beat us with his legs in that game. And we're seeing some of both now. It's been pretty glorious.
And also, I'd also say if you want to have like a tie-in to this, if you haven't, the wide receiver rank show would probably be important because we have a heavy conversation about Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, and that probably plays that role into this. But Justin Herbert, probably the most eye-opening of the ranks this week. The bye week's also playing a role in a few guys jumping up. Bo Nix, phenomenal matchup against the Raiders. He comes in at 7. I like that one. And, getting Baker Mayfield back in the top 10, if he has Mike Evans back, is really key. But let's talk about a couple quarterbacks that did not make the top 12 that you might have some thoughts on. One of which is Jordan Love. Jordan Love is actually in your top 12 for this week. You've got him at 12 against the 49ers. His ECR pushes him outside of the top 12. I generally like this. As I mentioned in a previous show, if they said Nick Bosa has a chance to play. I don't think he does. And that takes away a heavy part of the pass rush. They noted in that 49er game, the completion rate when Nick Bosa was out of the game was ridiculous. And Geno Smith, they were just getting stuff done as soon as Nick Bosa was knocked out. So I think that bodes very well for Jordan Love. One thing we do on our Discord, we have a Discord podcast we do, live podcast. Out of Bounds is a Monday show, 2 p.m. Eastern, live on Fantasy Pros Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. Myself, Bogman, and Pizapia. We do this game called the 3-1-1. We pick a 300-yard passer, 100-yard rusher, and 100-yard receiver. I took Jordan Love this week for the passer because I think he is going to slang on the 49ers because their secondary has continuously been their issue. And if Ward is out, even better. All of this preamble, I am setting you up to say I'm in agreement with you on Jordan Love, probably needing to be a bit higher, though you have noted, the passing touchdowns have been a little bit in question. But talk anything through more. Jordan Love is a top 12 quarterback for you this week.
Yeah, well, Welsh, you laid out the reasons why I think the 49ers are maybe not that difficult a matchup. Not an easy matchup, but not a difficult one, sort of neutral, I would say. We've just seen big swings in touchdown variance for Jordan Love. And I think that sort of explains why maybe ECR is cooler on him this week than I am. Over his first 5 games, he threw 15 touchdown passes, 3 a game. He wasn't going to keep up that torrid pace all season. Well, he certainly hasn't. He's thrown 1 touchdown pass in his last 3 games. He's not going to be slumping like this all season. So, I would expect the touchdown expectation for him against the 49ers to be somewhere around 1.5 or 2. And, the dude's averaging 260 passing yards a game. Like, he is going to get his yards. He got him last week, even though he threw fewer than 20 passes against the Bears. Still wound up with 261 yards, Welsh. I fundamentally still feel pretty good about Jordan Love.
I'm not looking at your ranks. Of these top 12 quarterbacks that are on ECR, who was kicked out for you? If you're able to identify that, is it like Tua, Geno, Baker? Who got kicked out of the top 12 for you for Jordan Love?
Geno is one spot lower. I mean,
Okay.
we haven't seen a lot out of Geno really as a passer lately.
Also, worst star rating, matchup rating, according to FantasyPros in the top 12. It's a B- start sit grade, but a 2-star matchup rating against the Arizona Cardinals for Geno.
And we know Geno's not going to bail out fantasy managers with his running most weeks, but I don't think we want to talk about that more, Welsh. I don't want to.
Yeah, I was about to say, most weeks except last week they sure did. That was pretty critical. Definitely moving on. A quarterback that you do not like this week, maybe relative to consensus, is CJ Stroud. And I think you've kind of been on this train for a little bit. I have a blind eye to CJ Stroud. Every week I just want to be higher on him because I think he's a massively talented, super smart quarterback, but it's just not coming into play with being able to get, Nico like on a low line this week. At least he got him back. You've got CJ Stroud at 17. This is really signifying you want to make almost any other play. You might be better streaming. There's probably better streaming quarterbacks in 12 QB leagues for people this week than CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just thought that the return of Nico Collins was going to magically transform Stroud back into like a no-brainer quarterback one. And for me, the bigger concern is his offensive line. Like, Nico certainly helps, but this offensive line is still a mess. And I don't think Stroud is fundamentally worse than he was in his outstanding rookie season. Well, he was due for some statistical regression in some categories. That was inevitable, but I don't think it helps that Stroud has been under constant duress for like the last 5 weeks with this pass rush constantly getting to him. He's probably just not feeling as comfortable in the pocket as he was feeling last season when he was just dealing all year. So it's kind of showing with the numbers. 2 touchdown passes in his last 5 games, 210 passing yards per game over that span, a 56.8% completion percentage, yards per attempt is under 7. So it's just a drop-off that I think we can contribute to the poor protection he's been getting.
And just all I could think when you were doing that was The Simpsons, like, stop it, he's already dead, just like beating it down, like, all right, we got it. It's bad. It's really rough. It makes me sad. One more quarterback let's talk about. You're a little bit higher, I think, than consensus on Matthew Stafford, who, on paper has a tough matchup against Philly, but, Puka and Cooper Kupp have just kind of revived that offense and revived Stafford. What has you putting Matthew Stafford inside that top 15 of QB and starting him over CJ Stroud?
The fact that he has Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back. That makes all the difference. Well, since getting those 2 guys back from injury, Stafford has thrown 10 touchdown passes in 4 games, and his yardage totals in those 4 games, 279, 298, 293, 295. Like, he is constantly throwing for like big chunks of yardage and all game long. Like, 2 of those games were actually pretty tough matchups against Miami and Minnesota. Didn't get a touchdown against Miami, but we remember that Thursday night game against the Vikings, 279 yards, 4 touchdown passes. I know the Eagles' pass defense has been terrific lately, and that has become like a matchup to sort of, kind of a matchup to dread lately, quite honestly. But I always feel good about Stafford when he has both Puka and Kupp at his disposal.
There you go. Let's talk about some tight ends. A lot of quarterback questions in there. Remember that live stream that we got going on? I'll tell you about at the end of the show if you got more quarterback questions, and you might have some tight end questions. So let's get up the big board here. The top 12 at tight end for week 12 is Travis Kelce coming in at number 1, Brock Bowers at 2, Trey McBride, George Kittle, David Njoku. That's your top 5. Cade Otton, Will Dissly, TJ Hockenson, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Tucker Kraft. That rounds out your top 12. Pretty good. This seems about right, too, by the way, as far as like the weirdness of tight end. Those core guys in the middle, there's some big questions, or the core guys at the top. the solid guys that have bumped up in the bottom, and then there's some like core middle questions. So pretty much the first two questions are going to center around that middle area. TJ Hockenson, though, ECR 8, you've got him at 12. I think we all have this really high expectation that he's going to like really, really get going. We're not quite seeing it. Did not happen last week. And we were having tons of questions over the last 3 or 4 days about like, what Taysom Hill's on bye, but what he did, who would you rather have rest of season, Taysom Hill or TJ Hockenson? I'm just not sure that Hockenson is going to be involved in that range where he looks any different than Jonnu Smith at this point. And I don't think that makes him a tier above. But what say you? Your rank maybe kind of signifies that maybe you agree with me, but we are more hyper-focused, obviously, on week 12 here. You've got him barely scratching in at top tight end 12. What say you on TJ Hockenson?
I'm worried about the usage, and it's probably to the Vikings' credit that they are bringing him back in sort of it's been a slow rollout for Hockenson, and he suffered a pretty catastrophic injury less than a year ago, so I totally get it. He's not playing a lot of snaps. His snap share has been between 45% and 48% in each of his first 3 games back. So it seems like they're putting a cap of like 50% snaps on him and following that pretty religiously. Fellow Vikings tight end Josh Oliver has more snaps than Hockenson over those 3 games. And in fact, since Hockenson has come back, Welsh, Josh Oliver is tight end 14 in fantasy points per game. Hockenson is tight end 23. So the matchup with the Bears is really no better than average, possibly a below average matchup. So I'm just not that enthusiastic this week about Hawk.
One thing that really jumps out, and this guy ranks higher than Hockenson this week, and also to me tells that story when you get back to that like Taysom Hill conversation and you're trying to battle between like who are the guys who's the core players and then where the line starts. I really think the line kind of starts between like 5 or 6. This week Njoku and Otten are there. But number 7, those aren't the guys we're talking about. Will Dissly. Will Dissly comes in at 7 versus Baltimore. We have had across shows. We've talked a bunch in the ranks about, just the secondary of Baltimore and what makes Justin Herbert so interesting. We've seen an uptick over the last 2 games in Will Dissly. And I think a lot of people are starting to think, this, I don't know how they get everybody involved. And I don't know if Will Dissly has as much of a ceiling as people are making it out to be. But I think, what the game plan is going to be against Baltimore is passing the ball. Will Dissly has seen an uptick in targets. Do you buy Will Dissly as a top? I mean, he's 7 in here. Do you buy him as a top 10 tight end and over TJ Hockenson?
I do. I've got Dissly. Let's see if I have him 7 or 8. So I'm pretty much right with the ECR on this one, Welsh. I have got Dissly tight end 8 against Baltimore. Not a bad matchup at all. And in fact, I think out of all the tight ends, like Dissly might have the best rest of season schedule of anyone. And it's funny, this guy has been through the injury ringer throughout his career. He has had like a bunch of injuries, some of them pretty catastrophic, and he keeps coming back. And I don't know if Will Dissly ran the 40 today, I'm not sure he could break 5.2. And yet this dude just keeps finding seams and getting open and making plays. And Justin Herbert seems to really like him as his security blanket. Like the backs in this offense don't catch a lot of passes. Dissly is sort of the security blanket dump off guy here. And I'm buying it. Welsh, like I think Dissly is a very playable streaming type tight end, but the thing is he keeps getting these great matchups and you can pretty much stream him through the rest of the season.
And he fully represents, if you don't have the core guys, the Kittles, the McBrides, the Bowers, the Njokus, Otten, well, to see if anything changes with Mike Evans there, but Otten kind of is maybe like the next. If those were the 1As, there's like a 1B of Otten, and then the world opens up. And I think what people are saying is I will take the matchup and the short sample size to put Will Dissly in at a very high level, and he is being ranked over guys like Hockenson, Hunter Henry. And this last one, as far as tight end goes, I want to ask you, we're going to do a 3-way match here. Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Tucker Kraft. That is 10, 11, and 12. Kraft has got the San Francisco 49ers. Goedert has got the Rams. And Jonnu Smith has got the Patriots, but that is actually ranked out as the worst matchup of those 3. Who's your favorite, and how do you rank them?
Jonnu 10, Goedert 13, Kraft 14. I think Jonnu is a big part of the Dolphins' Tua preservation plan. It just seems like they want the ball out of Tua's hands quickly, and that favors Jonnu at the expense of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, there aren't, we can't count on those plays every week where, like last week, where people forgot that Jonnu Smith was on the field and he was wide open and there was no one within 40 yards of him and he scored this long touchdown. But yeah, I mean, like, he is getting a pretty, like, the sort of usage we can hang our hats on, Welsh. And that was kind of always the issue with Jonnu. Like, this is the first time in his career, really, he's gotten that. And I think he's trustworthy. Goedert's the guy, like, I don't know. He's averaged 9.1 half-point PPR points per game in his first 2 games back from injury, but he's done it on 8 targets. I know the matchup against the Rams looks pretty good. They've allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends, but the Eagles just aren't throwing very much. They're the run-heaviest team in the league, and Goedert shares targets with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
It's a tough one. There's some tough tight end questions in there, but Jonnu taking the cake there, and he's the tight end, or at least a tight end one, where Goedert and Tucker Kraft do not for Pat Fitzmaurice. Oh, those tight end questions, those quarterback streamers, they're all there for you. And I know there are a ton more that we probably towed around, didn't quite hit. Well, guess what? You can come and ask those questions right here, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we do our start and sit question live stream. Make sure you go to youtube.com/fantasypros. Make sure you are following us, and you can either put notifications on specific shows like that one, or just put overall notification. And anytime we have any of these videos drop, you will be locked in. Friends, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Quarterbacks and tight end rankings for Week 12 for Pat Fitzmaurice. I'm Chris Welsh. Good luck in your Week 12, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.